We need to talk about Caddo Lake because it is the best mystery movie in many years. It's a mind-bending new film about a missing girl and a strange lake. In this video, I'll break it all down, I'll give you a full recap if you haven't seen it, and then I'll explain everything about the ending, who's related to who, what it all means, and what the movie is about. If you're new here, I'm MadMorph, and this is my movie club where I talk about movies and TV, so please do hit like and subscribe for more like this. And let's begin our deep dive into Caddo Lake. The movie opens with one of our main characters, Paris, trapped in a car underwater. He's with his mother, who seems to be having some kind of seizure. He can't get her out and has to escape and swim to the surface and sees that they've crashed off of a bridge, and we get the title screen as the movie begins. It's now a couple of years later and Paris works on the lake, clearing scrap and junk from the water. He leaves work with his dad to drive him to a funeral, and the dad says,
"They've been messing with the lake too long with that dam. Thing never should have existed in the first place. It ain't natural."
This is our first clue as to what could be the cause of what's going on in the film. It's then time to meet the other main character in this story, Ellie. She's shopping with her stepsister and they ride the boat home. These scenes are important to paint the picture of this lake as a community and that the lake itself is connecting everyone. They travel by it, they wave to people as they go by. It's all about connection. The big theme here is connection. And just as important, Ellie teaches her sister how to drive the boat. But when they arrive home, things start to get weird. They find the body of an alligator that has been cut in half with a perfectly clean slice across the belly. And the kids say it was found in the lake by their uncle. We're back with Paris, who is waiting outside to speak to a doctor. He's asking about what happened to his mother, as Paris believes that she was misdiagnosed, and the doctor says that she had myoclonic seizures. And here's what's important here is that Paris doesn't believe it, and he says his mother would bleed from the ears, which is not a symptom of that. She also hadn't had a seizure for 6 years when it happened on the bridge. So what changed? When Paris returns home, he finds his old flame, Celeste, hanging out and waiting for him. Meanwhile, Anna's got a loose tooth and Ellie helps her pull it out. They sit down for a large family dinner. And then another clue. Anna shares some dried dead moths that she says she found on the lake, but her uncle says they went extinct a while ago and asks where she found them. In the kitchen, Ellie's mum says to her, "I thought you hated these family dinners," and Ellie's response is,
"It's not my family. I'm not related to any of these people."
Things are clearly not all well between Ellie and her mother. She's even taking extra classes to try to graduate early so she can leave, but she needs her mum's signature and, importantly, her dad's death certificate for a form. She says, "I know you've got it. He's been missing for 7 years, so he's been declared dead." We cut back to Paris and Celeste, and they've clearly just got done hooking up in bed, and Paris apologizes for his part in being unhealthy after the accident. Clearly, his grief and his guilt over his mother has ruined their relationship, broken them up, and left Paris with a lot to deal with. Ellie and her sister rummage around under the bed whilst Ellie looks for the death certificate. Anna shows her a necklace saying that it belonged to Mimi, that's their grandma. When their mother comes in and gets angry and tells Ellie to leave. She does so and takes the boat to her friend's house. Here's where it starts to get weird. When Ellie is riding her boat home, Paris is brought to the water's edge by his dog acting strange.
Why you gotta be such a scaredy cat? What?
There is then a series of loud banging noises that both Ellie and Paris hear at the same time. Or do they? Paris seems particularly weirded out by them, his eyes glassy like they recall something. Meanwhile, Ellie sees a group of wolves emerging from the trees on the lake. They are not meant to be wolves in this area, and this part of the lake is called Found Herd. When Ellie wakes up at her friend's the next morning, there's a lot of voicemails telling her to come home, and it sounds like something bad has happened. She rides the boat home on the lake and finds out that her stepsister is missing. She left last night to try and follow Ellie to her friends and hasn't been seen since. But when Ellie goes back to the boat so they can go and look for her, their boat is gone. Out on the lake, Paris is at work and he follows a pipe through a dry part of the lake and finds an old pump jack. Weirdly, he can hear a muffled helicopter overhead, but there is nothing in the sky. He takes a step forward and passes through a portal wall as the sound cuts out. He holds his ears and hears wolves howling. He's freaked out and steps back out of the portal and notices that his hand is shaking with a tremor just like his mother's at the start of the film. When he goes back to the boat, his co-worker is there and the boat won't start because there's something caught in the propeller. Paris pulls out a yellow rope and the necklace that Anne was showing to Ellie. Both of these things will make sense later. Paris kind of recognizes the necklace and is totally weirded out by it. To us as the viewer, we think maybe something has happened to the missing girl in the water and that he's found some evidence, but it goes so much deeper than that. Paris takes the necklace to his dad's house and compares it with one that seems to be in some sort of evidence bag in his room. It's exactly the same. The search party is out on the lake looking and calling for Anna, and they find Anna's boat, but she's not in it and her life vest is missing. Paris at this point is starting to freak out, and he takes Celeste where the portal was to try to show it to her. But it's not working. What's important here is that it's raining and the water level is higher. They return back home and he says, "I just know my mum was out there." Celeste says, "Why would your mum be out there in the middle of the lake like that?" She tries to cheer him up by telling an old story about the last time they were on a boat together when there was a drought, and it reminds Paris of there being a drought that year, the same year that his mum died. Paris starts to cross-reference the dates of his mother's seizures with low water levels on the lake, and every time there was a drought, she had more seizures. The mystery is starting to come together, but the way that they kind of like fold all of these clues on top of each other, just reeling you in slowly into the lake and deeper down the rabbit hole, was great. We're back with Ellie and her mum, and they're getting into it over the fact that Anna is missing and her mum blames her. And she ends up spilling out the info that your dad didn't go missing, he left us for another woman. Ellie leaves. She's pretty devastated by this news, as she would be. Her mum seems to treat her terribly, and she goes out on the boat to look for Anna herself and ends up finding her way through the portal. Losing her way, she's found by a fisherman in the morning who takes her back to land. But this is where it gets freaky. When she goes home, she finds her family frantic because Anna has just gone missing. And then she looks out of the window and sees herself returning the boat, and she realizes that she has time traveled back one day. It's actually yesterday. Current Ellie then sneaks out and takes the boat, so she was the one who stole her own boat the day before. That's why it went just like mysteriously missing. And now we understand that the movie is about time travel. So Ellie rides the boat back to her portal as her hand starts to shake and tremor. At the very same time, Paris is heading his boat back to where he found the portal. Ellie passes by a broken bridge while Paris passes under an intact bridge, revealing to us that they are actually in two separate times. Ellie's in what we would call the present day in 2022, whilst Paris is in 2002, 20 years before. This was a really cool reveal. I had kind of been picking up on the fact that it was going to be a split time by this point and had been watching it as such, but it was still really cool the way that they did it. Had you managed to pick up on what was going on up to this point, or was it a surprise to you? Let me know in a comment. Ellie has rushed back to where they found Anna's boat the day before because she thinks it's the day before. If I go there, maybe I can find her before she really goes missing, but there's no sign of Anna.
Anna!
The way the portal works in the movie seems to be initially going through the first wall takes you to a space that is kind of an in-between. It's in between a bunch of different times. If you keep moving through that space, you pass through another wall and end up in another time completely. We also learn that it depends where you exit from that in-between space as to which time you end up in. So while Ellie follows the sound of Anna shouting, she ends up a month in the past. Anna was left on a boat by Ellie, and it's not the time that she wants to be in to find the her that's gone missing. Meanwhile, Paris follows the sound of loud banging that we heard earlier, and he ends up in a different time altogether. He finds himself in a completely dried out area of the lake and finds an unconscious Anna. We know that Anna likes to explore. She found the moths, she's a bit of an adventurer, and it seems like she has found her way through the portal herself. But she's had an accident. She's impaled on a stick and is unconscious out here in the middle of nowhere. Paris picks her up and carries her out of the woods and finds the dam being built. The loud banging sound is them setting off dynamite to clear the area. He runs up to a truck asking for help and discovers that it is the year 1952 when the dam was first being built. The men take Anna and are a bit concerned, so they interrogate Paris a little bit and he runs away. He realizes when he's safe that he can go back through time and he plans to go back to save his mother. He's really excited at the prospect of that. Meanwhile, Ellie's able to get back to her own timeline by following the sound of her phone ringing in the boat. That leads her out of the right exit, which brings her back to the correct time. It's her stepdad worrying where she is, and she says, "Come and get me, I'm at Found Heard," and then repeats this to herself again, saying "Found Heard," like something has just occurred to her. We'll get into this at the end. But she doesn't want to wait here. She decides to try and look for Anna again after having this realization, and ties a yellow rope to her boat and around a tree to find her way back with. This is super smart. She goes back through the portal and out of another exit. But just after she does this, Paris is coming back through the in-between and sees the yellow rope. Unfortunately, he doesn't go the way that Ellie is going. He goes from the way that she came and ends up in the future in Ellie's present day.
I'm a little lost.
Is this your boat? You got some identification?
Yes, sir.
He tries to escape and crashes his boat and is taken to hospital and handcuffed to the bed. Meanwhile, Ellie is in the year 2005 and searches for Anna in case she's lost there. She spots a pickup truck with the necklace that Anna had hanging from its rearview mirror. She breaks into the truck to try to retrieve it and see what's going on, and is confronted by Celeste, who attacks her for stealing the necklace. Ellie says, "Where did you get this? It was my sister's," and Celeste says it's his mother's, him on the flyer. Anna Lang, it was Anna's. So Ellie picks up the flyer, and it's a missing person poster for Paris. And she realizes that this woman is her mother in the past. Celeste talks to Ellie on her arm, and she says, "What did you call her?" And she realizes that that is her as a baby in this exact moment.
It's okay, Ellie. What did you just call her?
I just need him to come home, okay? Tell him I miss him.
Celeste thinks she is another woman and that she knows Paris, and tells her to tell Paris to come home, that they have a baby together now. Ellie is the lady that her mother remembers attacking her that made her think that Paris left for another woman. Paris is Ellie's missing father, and we know that he never knew that he had a kid. We flip back to Paris in 2022 and it starts to rain.
What happened?
It's gonna close.
Paris knows that this means that the portal isn't going to work, and he starts to panic. It's going to close unless he gets back to it right now. The news says there is a storm coming and that the dam is in danger of breaking, so he says he needs the bathroom and he tries to escape. Him making his escape is kind of cut in with all of this next bit that we're going to talk about, but rather than keep chopping and changing back between the two, I'm just going to focus on the next bit, and the whole time that this is going on, we're cutting back to Paris escaping. The way that they edited this was actually really cool. Ellie has remembered the name Anna Lang that Celeste said and searches it up on a public computer with internet, and she finds the news of Paris's mother, Anna Lang, dying in a car accident. That's in the year 1999 at the age of 55. She works out how old she would have been and finds pictures of her little sister in a class photo from the 50s and prints it out. Ellie continues to search up her sister through the years, watching her life play out in historical photos on the internet. From a high school picture and her name now being Anna Bennett Reed because she got adopted, she sees her in college with a sweetheart. She sees her graduation photo and her obituary, which comes with even more photos, her and Ben Lang, which is Paris's dad, getting married. We see that she became a teacher and she looks so happy with her school children. And Ellie sees a picture of her as a mother, a photo of her with Paris as a young boy, the man who would go on to become her father. Back in the future, Paris sees on the TV news of a missing girl, Anna Bennett. He sees that it's the girl that he saved and took back to the 1950s, and it starts to click for him that that is his mother who he saved. He overhears one of the nurses mention Ben Lang, that's his dad, so he finds his room and finds him seemingly on his deathbed. He had been coughing a lot earlier in the film as a foreshadowing to this, and here in the future, 20 years later, it seems to have caught up with him. He's on a ventilator so he can't speak, but he sees his son Paris and reacts. He's seeing him just as he was, the same age as the year he went missing. Come to visit with him in his final moments, he must have just thought it was the end for him and this was the angel come to collect him. But Paris tells him, "I found Mum."
I found Mom. There's a place on the lake. You can change times. While she was sick, I saved her.
This lets us know that Paris has in fact worked out that Anna in the woods was his mum as a kid and that he saved her. He promises his dad that he's coming home to him and escapes out of the window as the police close in. You'd imagine in some way for Ben this was nice to hear, that his wife wasn't crazy, not only from the seizures and what she might have said had caused them, but you would think that Anna might have shared at some point, especially early on in her life, "I'm from a different time. I don't know how I ended up here, but I've grown up in a different time to what I had for the first 8 years of my life." And now he knows that she wasn't crazy. We're back with Ellie, and the pop-up on her computer is asking, "Need more time?" It's a poignant reminder that time is running out and that we always need more. She makes her own way back to the portal and starts to follow the rope back through. But while this is going on, Paris is himself trying to get back to the portal in a race against time, so he hijacks a car to escape in. And in a twist of fate, the very car that he hijacks is being driven by Ellie's stepdad with her mother riding passenger. A grown-up Celeste, the mother of Paris's child, his former flame, recognizes him as the boy that went missing 20 years ago, but he's too preoccupied with getting away and drives off. He ends up on top of the dam but is surrounded by the police, and his only chance to get home is now, so he jumps off the dam and into the water. He is swimming, trying to make it to the portal in time as the dam breaks and the flow of water throws him underwater and he cracks his head and drowns. It's like a bookend from the start of the movie with him drowning underwater with his mother in the car, and this is now how he ends up drowned in the same lake. At the exact same time, Ellie has passed through the portal back to the present day where her dad currently is and has just died in the lake, and the water rushes up at her feet, and we see in real time how the water level rising closes the portal. The rope is cut clean, just like the alligator at the start, and it's gone. The portal only opens when it's dry, and now with the dam broken, perhaps it's closed for good. Ellie's stepfather shows up and she finds out that a man who looked just like her father stole their car and died jumping from the dam. Ellie realizes that her dad has also been passing through these portals, and she tells her stepfather,
Nature made this place. We're family. You and me. Through Anna.
We've always been family.
But this moment is a moment of realization for Ellie that they are actually related, which calls back to her sitting at that table saying, "I'm not related to any of these people," but she was much more than she knew. She tells Daniel that she knows that Anna is okay, and they head home.
Anna's okay. I know she is.
She sits next to her mother, who is watching the TV in a daze, and it's showing a photo of the man who died. It's Paris, her missing boyfriend and Ellie's father.
It's him. He was trying to get back.
She's stunned. She's obviously just wondering how this is possible. There's the boy that went missing 20 years ago. He looks the same. He stole their car today, and now he's gone. But Ellie tells her he was trying to get back to us. She shows her the printed out photo of Anna in 1952, and she says,
They didn't mean to leave us.
There's a look of realization from Celeste as she sees the cuts on Ellie's face, and she realizes they're the cuts that she gave her 20 years ago in the fight by the truck. She realizes it's true, and they hug as the movie ends. And with that tragic and emotional ending, we can ask ourselves, what does the movie mean? So, what does it all mean? Who's connected to who, and what happens next? Will Ellie have seizures like her grandma and her father before her? What is the true meaning behind the movie? And why is that ending not actually as sad as everyone says? I've got the answers for you, but before we get into it, now is a great time to remind you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you've enjoyed this video up to this point and you want to see more movie explains and recaps from me, then please do hit like and subscribe. Did you know the movie originally only had Ellie going through time? She didn't know that she was time traveling until the very end of the movie. The writers decided that it was a bit unfulfilling as a cinematic device and created the two protagonist approach with her father's parts as well. But the ending was always the same. It's always been built around the line, "They didn't mean to leave us." The writers said, "It means more than just time travel. It's death. It's everything. It really affected us." But they did add in some scenes between Ellie and Daniel during production, just because of how great a job Eric Lang was doing in that role. So that entire boat scene where she says, "We're family, you and me," was actually not in the original. But one of the big questions is, could Paris have had a happy ending? Within the rules of time travel in this movie, the answer is yes, logically, but for storytelling reasons, they didn't. The way that time travel works in this movie means that what happened is going to happen. It must always happen as it did. It is fated. Nobody in the movie changes the timeline from what has already happened and exists. I'll point this out more specifically in some of the follow-up questions, but what's important to know is that they could never really change anything. They had always gone back in time. Ellie had always been the one to take the boat from her. Paris had always saved Anna, because without any of these things happening, none of them would exist. It's destiny. However, even with playing by the rules, Paris could have a happy ending. If he did not run and try to make it back to 2003, he could have existed in that timeline with Celeste and, more importantly, with his daughter. But he was rushing to get back to his own timeline, to get back to his dad. If he had stayed in the hospital and not jumped off of the dam, he would have lived happily in the future where Celeste and Ellie are. His trying to return to his own time was always going to be doomed. It was fated. We know that he's been missing for 20 years. He never made it back. That's what's so funny is you're watching this movie and you're just willing him to make it. You really want him to make it back and have a happy ending. You're on the edge of your seat hoping that he makes it. But everything, all of the facts, if you actually stop for a second, the facts say that it is impossible for him to do that. Narratively, Paris had found peace. His wish was to save his mother. That's how the movie opens. That is his driving force through his entire life. He gets to know that he did that. He didn't manage to go back and save her as an adult in that car, but he lived a life of guilt and grief. And now he knows that he saved her as a child. He saved himself in that way too, leaving her in a time where she would grow up to be his mother. That was his destiny fulfilled and the completion of his arc. He wanted to go back and save his mum, but he didn't realize that he had already done it. The writer said, that's his story. It's over. What would he have done if he had stayed in the future? Celeste is older than him now, so what would there be to do? I kind of disagree on that point, in that I think he could have still been a great dad to Ellie and been involved, but in terms of like the narrative of the movie, it is much more poignant and meaningful for him to pass, as everyone gets this kind of peace and healing from the journey. So before I break down everyone's endings, let's work out who is related to who, because it can be a bit confusing. Here is the family tree. Anna is Daniel's daughter with an unknown woman. Celeste's daughter is Ellie, and Celeste and Daniel are a couple. Ellie is the daughter of Celeste and Paris. Paris goes missing in 2003 and saves Anna, taking her back to 1952. She grows up to meet Ben Lang and have Paris. So Anna is Ellie's stepsister and her grandmother. Daniel is both Ellie's stepfather and her great-grandfather, and Daniel is also Paris's grandfather. Make sense? But what's even more confusing is the origin of the necklace, which we'll come into after we talk about what the movie is actually about. And why isn't it as sad and tragic as you first think? The movie is about families, reconciliation, and past lives. And I don't mean past lives like, I was a knight in medieval times and now I've been reborn in 2024. I mean that the writers said the seed of this movie, the very inspiration of it, was, do you ever really know your parents before they had you? What was their life before you? It's really fascinating that that question alone kind of spawned this entire time travel adventure and trip. I love that. So why is it not as sad as you think? Paris spiraled into grief over the guilt of not being able to save his mother, but through the course of the movie he is healed by the realization that he actually saved his mother as a little girl. This is healing, it's a completion of his arc and his circle, and he's able to pass at peace. Celeste has clearly been stricken by the grief of Paris being missing. It's alluded to that she has a bit of a drinking problem. She does not seem like the same woman that she was 20 years ago, and it's driven her and Ellie apart. Just like the grief and the guilt drove Celeste and Paris apart. This connection and Celeste is also saved by the actions of Paris and Ellie. Celeste now knows he didn't mean to leave, and was always trying to get back to them. That is very healing. She clearly never recovered from him going missing, but now she's able to start the process of healing. It's important to remember that Paris told Celeste about there being something strange on the lake that they went to look for that day. She may have even gone back there herself looking for him at different times. I find it interesting that her hand does this movement. It's the very last shot of the movie, and I don't know if this is just alluding to it or it's meant to be some kind of clue that perhaps Celeste has also passed through there at some point, because that looks a lot like the tremors that you get after passing through the portal, doesn't it? I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in a comment. Meanwhile, Daniel gets somewhat of a healing ending because he knows that Anna is okay. He believes what Ellie says and is touched by it. And Ellie herself is healed by knowing that her dad didn't leave them, that she's connected to her new family by blood, which seemed to be a big deal to her when they were having the family dinner.
It's not my family. I'm not related to any of these people.
We're family. You and me. Through Anna.
We've always been family.
Even Ben Lang gets a nice ending because he gets to see his missing son returning after 20 years and find out that his wife wasn't sick and crazy. All in all, you might say that little Anna had the worst of it as she goes from 2024 as an 8-year-old and wakes up in 1952 as a young woman. But the impression we get from the historical pictures that Ellie looks at are that she kind of had an okay life and made the best of it. Maybe she convinced herself somehow that she imagined the first 8 years of her life and soon it just became a distant memory. It seems very strange, and we never get any of that backstory of her mentioning to anyone like, "I'm from the future, by the way, I don't know how I ended up here." It just doesn't happen, but it doesn't need to. The origin of the necklace. Now, this one is interesting. I'm going to lay it out for you and you tell me what you think of this. So, where did this necklace come from? Celeste says it was given to her by Paris and that it was his mother's. But we see Paris give Celeste that necklace in the car after trying to show her the portal in 2003. It's the necklace that he found in the propeller of the ship days before, along with Ellie's yellow rope, which tells us that the one that he finds was dropped by Ellie returning from 2005. It's the one that she took from Celeste's truck. But that's the one that Paris gave to her in 2003, and so where does the necklace enter the loop? There's no entry point for it. It is just a continuous loop as far as I can tell. And I think that that is intentional. I think it's meant to represent the similar kind of loop that we have with Anna being Paris's mum. Anna can only be Paris's mum if she is sent back to the 1950s, but she can only be sent back to the 1950s if Paris exists to save her, otherwise she would not have made it out of the woods from where she had had the accident. So how did she end up in the 1950s if Paris didn't exist, and Paris can only exist if Anna is saved and sent back to the 1950s? It's a bit of a paradox. We don't know where this loop began, we don't know which came first. It's possible that at one time there was a different timeline and events happened, and this is the current fate and destiny that has turned itself into a loop. But thankfully none of this is dug into in the movie, because when time travel movies try to explain themselves, it never really ends well. It's just left up to be a mystery for you to ponder on. What inspired the movie? So the idea for the movie came from the team of Celine Held and Logan George finding a picture of the real-life Caddo Lake on Reddit of all places. The duo had been trying to formulate plans for their next feature and were smitten with what they saw and read about the lake. They packed their things and they went to live on the lake for a couple of months and write the story. They watched every time travel movie and show available while writing, with Dark being a massive inspiration, clearly, and the aesthetic and the vibe of one of my favourite movies, Prisoners. So what happens next? What happens after the movie ends? Will Ellie continue to have seizures, and will anybody else be time travelling? I would say it's quite unlikely because the dam has broken, the lake has filled up, the water level has risen. The seizures in the portal only occur during times of low water levels. The dam was built in the 1950s during a period of great drought, and that is when the portal is open. They then filled the lake, and we can see on the graphs that the water level wasn't low enough again for like another 30-40 years. So yes, they could repair the dam, or there could be droughts in the future, but it's very unlikely that these characters will be messing with the time loop anytime soon. And now we know that the tragedy at the start of the movie with Anna driving off of the bridge because she started to have a seizure is because there was a drought that year which caused her seizures to come back. The seizures, again, are kind of up for interpretation because we only see them affect Paris and Ellie immediately after they pass through a portal, and we know that Anna, or at least we suspect, she wasn't doing that since the 50s. So we can assume that when the portal is open, if you are kind of out of time, if you are in the wrong place in the wrong time, that they will also cause seizures in you. Whilst the portal is open, you are affected because really you should be going back to your own time. So since she was back in the 50s, every time that portal was open, which was like 5 or 6 times through the years, Anna was having these seizures. She then didn't have them for 6 years until that fateful day when she crashed the car. So how does the portal work? We went into it a bit during the recap about how there is an in-between space, so you go through one wall, you exist in an in-between, and depending on where you exit, you end up in a different time. We see them being directed and led by sounds from the different times as they go through this in-between. Paris can hear a helicopter, you can hear wolves, Ellie can hear her phone, that leads her back. But there's one time that Ellie goes through which is really interesting to me because she goes through the first barrier and continues on through the second barrier, which we know arrives you in a brand new time. She seems to be in this really prehistoric looking area, perhaps where those extinct moths came from, as we see those fly through at some point, but she then continues forward, passing through another wall into another in-between, hearing her phone ringing, which leads her back through another and then out. My interest in this one is twofold, because first of all, that is a very strange place where she ended up in the in-between. It looks like it might be dinosaur times or something. And secondly, it shows that perhaps that whole area is just super weird and janky with the time-space continuum, because she went through 4 portal walls to get back to her time, and we've only ever seen people go through one and exit one. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it, but it seems completely intentional, and to give us this extra mystery of what does that mean, where could you really end up, how far back does it go? Which leads me to the idea of found herd. I think this has been going on for so long that from whenever that place got its name, it was literally named after a herd being found, a herd significant and strange enough that they named the area after it. The same way that the wolves and the alligator and the moths have passed through from different times, there was probably a herd of creatures at some point that people thought, well, that's not supposed to be in this area, so they called it found herd. And that is my recap and my thoughts on Caddo Lake. I could honestly talk about this film for another hour. There's a lot to kind of get into and things that it could mean. They left enough of the mystery open for us to be able to keep talking about it like this, and I absolutely loved this film. It made me emotional, it made me intrigued. It's definitely one of my favorite mystery / time travel themed things that I've seen for a while. I'm a huge fan of Lost and Dark, and I really, really enjoyed it. I would have loved to have seen this be a TV show, and maybe this will do well enough that they could pick it up and turn it into a Caddo Lake TV show, because there is more to dive into with this mystery, and you can give me 12-hour-long episodes of this and I will be all over it. It would be awesome. But that's where we're going to put a pin in this one. If you want to find more of me, check out the links below this video. I've got a podcast where I read books to help you sleep. It's free on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere you get podcasts. It's called Down to Sleep. And I've got my gaming channel where I play games, which is just a place to chill and hang out. So check out those things, follow me on Instagram, and I will see you in the next video. Good night.